Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, the Central Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, for a education session on succession planning for your business. We are excited to bring this to our membership. It's a important topic that many don't want to think about, and we feel it's so important that we want to share the knowledge of our presenters today. I'm going to introduce you to three presenters. We've got Amy Stratton, who's an attorney at Moonen, Stratton and Waldman, located on the east side of Providence. She has been practicing law for 25 years and is licensed in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Her practice focuses on estate planning, business planning, and estate and trust administration. Our next presenter is Tammy Collins. Tammy has more than 23 years of full charge bookkeeping expertise. She holds QuickBooks certifications for QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Point of Sale, and QuickBooks Enterprise. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Eastern Connecticut State University and a Master's of Science in Accounting from Merrimack College. Our final presenter is Christopher Brook. Chris is a native Rhode Islander from Warwick. After a short career in manufacturing, Chris worked for Amica and Liberty Mutual, as well as two local independent agencies. In 2015, he opened his own independent insurance agency in Warwick, Brook Insurance Associates, to serve the needs of business owners and the local community for auto, home, and life insurance. Specialties include commercial insurance for manufacturers, distributors, restaurants, architects, law offices, and CPAs. Chris's firm does business in Rhode Island, Mass, Connecticut, Florida, and Vermont, and is currently planning to grow into other states. So join me in welcoming them to this session, and thank you all for joining us. If you want to not be on screen, you can turn off your video, and we'll go ahead and get started. Amy, you're up.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thanks for being here today. I'm going to share my screen now so you can see the PowerPoint presentation that we put together for you today. Just as a precursor, I do like to tell people that I take a light touch when we do presentations about estate planning and business planning. I understand the responsibility that us as professionals have to make sure that we're handling the most important things in your life, your money, your family, your business, your health. But at the same time, it can be awfully heavy if I really focus on all of those things on an emotional level. So we'll take a light touch with it today and go through what it's like to handle both estate planning and business planning. When people come into my office, what I tell them is to look around the table and pick an empty chair. That empty chair is going to represent their business. That's a separate person. You hear a lot of people say, my business is my baby. That's the truth. It really is a completely separate entity, a completely separate person, if you will, that we need to plan for. So that's why I start off with this slide, that your business has a life cycle just like you. You got to plan for it. This was a great quote that I love to share with business owners, especially as they're growing, because people are a lot of times in growth mode. This is a dream for them to open a business. When we look at Jeff Bezos himself, he says, Amazon will go bankrupt. Lifespan of a business tends to be 30 plus years, not 100 plus years. And that's Amazon. Never mind small, medium business sizes that are really the foundation of the Rhode Island economy. And then this is a favorite quote of mine that I use when I talk to people about estate planning quite a bit. You never know what you're going to get. You never know what your future holds for you. Life is unpredictable. All we can do is try to plan for it. It's one of the few areas of law where we're actually fortune tellers. We're looking into our crystal ball and trying to plan for every contingency, every possibility that'll come up. So that's why I love this quote when we're talking about planning. And you're going to see some examples of both planning for businesses and planning for individuals. Different things that can happen in your life. Some you've probably never even thought about that we can plan for. So here's the business life cycle. I meet with a lot of people here at the beginning when they're organizing their new LLC or their new corporation, and they're just getting things off the ground. So we help them with foundations. Once they're in growth mode here, level 2, that's when we're talking about increasing profits, bringing on employees, financing, commercial property investments. But we also have to start thinking about transfers, and there's different types of transfers depending on whether we're dealing with a family business or a larger business that may be preparing itself for sale. At the end of the business life cycle, we're talking about potentially bankruptcy, illness, disability, death, but we're also talking about transfers such as sales and transfers to family members as well. I put this up here just because the planning tools are very different depending on how many business owners there are. When we're dealing with a sole proprietor or a single person business, a single member LLC, sole shareholder, we're focusing more on the estate planning side. What are we going to do to make sure that that business, the person who's created this business, transfers the value of that business to somebody else? Make sure it has value and make sure that that value is maximized and transferred easily to somebody else. It's a different set of tools that we use than when we have multiple member LLCs, like a partnership or a multi-member LLC, or when you talk about shareholders in a corporation. So I just did want to differentiate that with this slide. Here's the reason to plan. You know, whenever I ask people, why are you planning? It's because you are the business. Small businesses like mine, where I'm a small business owner, Tammy's a small business owner, Chris, we are the business. If we can't work, the business is going to disappear. We want to be sure that we're protecting the business as a separate entity, both in terms of value and to maintain continuity. If you were to die or be disabled, we want to be sure that the business can continue. Who are the people and what are the tools that we need to do that? So here are the basics. Here's what we're planning for generally when we start talking about business succession or even traditional estate planning for an individual. Death, that's when people come in and say, I need a will. They probably don't. They may need more than that. And if you're a business owner, you definitely need more than a will. Disability, and I'm hoping Chris is going to be able to touch on disability insurance today. Because it's so important for a small business owner. There's a statistic out there that says I hate to just throw numbers, but I believe this is correct, 80% more likely to become disabled than to die at the peak of your business. Again, I have no verification for that number, but it's something that I have heard over the years, and it's something that's really important to plan for. Incapacity, that's my folks that come in and have early onset Alzheimer's or other dementia related ailments that we will plan for. Bankruptcy, loss of a license, failure to carry out expected duties. You'll see this a lot when we have friends who start a business. There may be one who's not quite carrying his or her weight. We need to be able to plan for that as well. And then retirement. Here are the unexpected events that can happen. A loss of family business to estate taxes. I have a family right now that I was talking to Jennifer about before we started today. And it's a fascinating case because these were first generation folks that came from Portugal and developed an amazing real estate portfolio, residential, commercial, just an incredible hardworking family that had millions of dollars of real estate business holdings both in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Unfortunately, one of the husband of the couple passed away and had absolutely nothing in place. No will, no trust, nothing. We've been going through the probate process now for 1.5 years. During COVID, it's really been extended, and that's just Rhode Island. We still have to do an ancillary probate in Massachusetts. And when you're dealing with no will, that's called an administration. So you have to get court permission in order to do every single transfer. And that's including transfers to family members, to a wife or children. It includes transfers if we want to sell the property. So in order to get court permission, we have to have a court appearance. We have to show up and be there as attorneys. And to get on a court calendar these days is really difficult because they may be meeting once a month by Zoom. So estate taxes, we can lose a family business to estate taxes. because there can be millions of dollars of property and quite a bit in estate tax, especially in Rhode Island, and even more so in Massachusetts. And the probate process definitely doesn't make it easy. So that's the loss of liquidity here. No formalized arrangement to transfer ownership. Again, that's a lot like the example I was just telling you about. So you'll see that all of these different issues can come up when we're dealing, especially with a family-owned business. We need to plan for that. Here's the team that you need in place. I say business planning attorney. It's good to have an estate planner on your side because they're going to know how trusts work and be able to help you identify people who can move different businesses into a trust and be able to help maintain that continuity so that a trustee can step in, write checks, sign contracts, whatever needs to be done until the new business owner can be appointed. But it's also important to have somebody with a business background, because if they don't have that corporate background, they're not going to be able to understand the dynamics, particularly in a family-owned business where there's a lot of overlap between the personal and the professional. You need an accountant and a bookkeeper to make sure that those finances are being tracked. Insurance professional, we need Chris Brook. We need him to help us make sure that we're able to fund these different tools that we have in place. Financial advisor is very helpful. So you need that team. And there's a lot of discussion. I think a lot of people think about putting a plan in place, but the thinking about it doesn't help. You know, my example that I gave you of that beautiful Portuguese family, they had talked about doing wills, they had talked about trust. They just weren't sure who to go to as an advisor or where to start that process. So it is really important that you take action. You have to move forward with it, even if it's difficult, even if it's not perfect. I tell people perfection can be really difficult when we're trying to look into the future. Let's lay a foundation. We can always change these plans as we go forward, but it's better to have something in place that may be a little bit imperfect than to wait for perfection, because it's really never going to happen. Nobody wants to think about this stuff. Here are the tools. They do vary depending on the size of the business. We're going to protect the value, reputation of the business, and here are the goals. What's important here is that we have that combination. The trust to avoid probate if we can, but also business succession planning. So you're going to see that I have a list of tools coming up, and that's for multiple member entities when I'm talking about buy-sell agreement. Let me see if it's on the next slide. Yeah. So with a single owner, we're talking about traditional estate planning documents, a living trust, a will, powers of attorney, and even a key person agreement for that person who's the critical person in your business that you can't live without. But when we're talking about multi-member entities, and I'm drafting a couple of these right now for a few of my businesses that have 2 members, 3 members, what we start doing is something called a buy-sell agreement. With a buy-sell agreement, what we're doing is, and when we talk about a death scenario, this is the most easy example. I have 2 business owners that own a series of bars and a series of different LLCs, all separate. They want to plan for one person's death. So what's going to happen is there's going to be partner A and partner B. Partner A passes away. Partner B, in theory, should have a life insurance policy that's going to buy the shares from partner A. So partner B is now 100% owner. And partner A's estate or trust is going to receive the money or the value of that life insurance policy. That way, if you worked your whole life and had nothing to provide as a legacy, perhaps to your estate or to your trust. That's the most simplified way to explain a buy-sell agreement. When it comes to cross purchase and redemption, the real difference is taxi, and I think that's where Tammy's going to be able to help us out, because there are tax benefits to having a redemption where the entity itself buys those shares back, as opposed to a cross purchase where the individuals are insuring each other. So there's differences there, but I didn't want to get too technical when I was just talking about the basics and the tools that we have in place. With that, I'm going to throw this over to Tammy to talk about valuation, how to make sure that we maintain the value of a business and have those accounting and bookkeeping records that we need, because what we want to be sure is that when we're transferring a business, we're keeping the value up to a certain level. And that's where estate planning documents come in. Because what we're going to be doing is making sure that there's a trustee or somebody in place who's able to maintain that continuity, so maintain that value. So even if there isn't life insurance in place, there is something of value that can be transferred between business owners to make sure that the decedent has something going into their estate or into their trust. And with that, I'll be quiet for a couple of minutes and let Tammy talk about valuation.
Thank you, Amy. So the reason I came up with the idea to have this session available to business owners was during the pandemic, 2 clients of mine passed away extremely unexpectedly, one at the age of 45, one at the age of 55, neither from COVID, ironically enough. And even before that, 3 years ago, coming up on 4 years now, my husband passed away at the age of 45. Nothing can be planned as far as that goes. Death and taxes, we know those are the only 2 things that happen with any, certainty, but planning ahead with a succession plan and contingency planning will help the business to continue on. And like Amy said, sometimes if there's 2 partners, one partner will have life insurance that will pay out to buy out their half of the business so that the other owner has full ownership of it. Or in other scenarios, their children could step into the role and take over for their deceased parent who left them the business. What that entails, however, and I've seen a lot of, sometimes the children don't want the business, in which case the buy-sell would be really helpful because it lets the person who does want to continue the business to continue doing what they do. Sometimes the children are just not capable. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the training. They've never been interested in the business. So now it's just handed to them and they have no idea how to continue on. And that sets a lot of problems for the rest of the employees and management team that's in place below this person, because there is no skill, no knowledge, no capability for the new owner to continue on the business. So there's a bunch of different scenarios that can happen, but planning with an estate planning attorney, planning with an insurance policy with Chris, those things can enable the business owner to make the best decisions for their particular situation. And again, what works for me, my business might be completely different than what works for Chris. And that's okay. We're all individuals. We have our own plans. We have our own goals, but that's why we reach out to other professionals like the folks we've assembled here so that we can pull it all together in a way that's going to work for us as individuals. So let's see, where's that going? Oh, so there's obviously all these folks are really what's necessary for succession planning, especially some of the contingency planning, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that can be done internally to start off with, but this is stuff where you really need to seek outside help to work through everything. The pandemic really had a devastating effect on a lot of businesses, but people are very resilient. They did a pivot. They figured out how to continue to operate, and many businesses came out on the other side even more successful than they were pre-COVID. So it all depends on what you want to do. And some people threw up their hands and said, I'm done. This is too much trouble. Other people, this has been my dream. I'm going for it. And they reached out for help. The Chamber of Commerce provided, especially our central chamber, a ton of help to other business owners during the pandemic. We had PPP loans. We had grants from state organizations, and even some of the towns and municipalities offered up grants for business owners in certain industries to continue. The bars and restaurants were hit particularly hard because we couldn't get together anymore, and those things helped them. But again, it was unexpected. This is something to put into a contingency plan. We didn't see it coming. Now we know it's a possibility, obviously, because it happened, and it's something to think about in our future plans. But again, for succession planning, looking ahead, looking forward, being proactive and planning rather than reactive after the fact is really what's going to help people get through a difficult situation. Those two clients that I was mentioning that passed away, one of them, and Jennifer and Lauren and Christopher know too, he was 55 years old. He had a successful business. He had employees, but he had no plan in place. And nobody was even a signer on his bank account. So when he passed away, couldn't even run a payroll that week. It was a big mess. And now it's in receivership, and there was someone handling everything. But all those employees had to be let go, and they moved on to other things. But that was tough for them because they had been with him a long time, and it stinks. You usually, when you're moving jobs, you get to plan it, but that's not what happened in this case. So a contingency plan, succession plan for him would have been very, very helpful in that situation. So let's see. So the part of the contingency and succession planning that we keep talking about is the business's risk management strategy. And again, that's going to help it determine what it needs to consider. What it needs to consider, and sorry, I got a message. Determine what it needs to consider and what things it needs to specifically plan for. So going into valuation, that's a part of that planning too. If I were to sell my business, my book of business today, I would have it evaluated. What are they going to look for? They're going to look through my books, obviously. So bookkeeping, having your CPA at the end of the year, going through, checking your books, doing your taxes, all those pieces are very important. Somebody saying, oh, my business is too small, I don't really need a bookkeeper. Well, maybe not, but if your books aren't in order, then it's going to cost you a lot more later to fix it. So that's really important to keep the books up to date. Monthly reconciliations, quarterly review, an annual review, all those things will help to make a clear financial picture. If you go to a bank to seek financing and you do not have good books, they're not going to even entertain giving you a loan because you have nothing to present to them. You can have the best idea in the world, but without solid financial information to back it up, then there's no way they're going to even consider giving you a loan. So from the books, every industry is different, but if you've got solid record keeping and tax returns to prove that the business's success over the past 5 years or so, when you go out into the industry to get a value on the business, whether it's by appraisal or something with the bank that they seek to determine from your books, they're going to look at what the business has done historically and see where its profit is, if it's growing every year or if it's on the decline. They're going to check all that out. That has a lot to do with the future value of the company. So those forecasts based on your financial records are going to enable them to determine what your company is worth. If I have a company that makes 100,000 profit every year after year consistently, then they can look at that and say, okay, this is consistent. They've got the same client base. It continues to work. It moves forward. Then they can look at that and say, okay, here's a value on this. And it's going to help you with seeking the right amount of insurance from Chris and determining what they have to do should one owner or the other pass away, or if it's a single member entity, if that sole owner passes away, what it would cost someone else to buy out that business and continue it on so that the family could get the proceeds of the sale of the business. So those are, bookkeeping and finance is just crucial to a business. And like you said, a lot of companies think they're too small to bother with bookkeeping, but try to do a tax return from a shoebox and you'll see the value of good bookkeeping. I would say I could do this all day, but I'm going to let Chris talk, because I think the next step is, once you've determined the value of the business, letting Christopher advise on the best type of insurance policy to suit the business's particular needs.
I wasn't going to let Chris talk just yet.
Come on, I have the best part. We get to talk about insurance, everyone's favorite topics.
We all love it.
I did put a couple of slides up there for you, Chris, but you can feel free to use them or not.
Okay.
But I think that, just so you know, after you're done talking about the insurance products that you have available, I want to touch on one of Tammy's points that she was talking about, having a person in there who can write checks or continue the business. That's going to be really important. That is something I want to touch on once you're done. So I'll be quiet now.
Bear with me a moment here as I hand how to get the right screen on Zoom showing here. So bear with me a moment here. Let's see here. Can't seem to get this to go full screen. Try this again and move it over to this screen. Try it again. Are you seeing a full screen or just?
Oh, but I'm going to stop sharing mine.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think we're
okay.
still seeing Amy's. Now we got you,
Okay.
Chris. I see your building.
Okay, is it one screen or is it multiple screens?
I got two. We got the slide with the bottom, and your second slide is there too.
All right.
Holy cow.
There, okay, let's try this over here.
There you go.
All right. If I hit this button, it's supposed to magically work, but it keeps switching screens on me, and I'm not sure why. So hold on, my apologies, guys. I don't use PowerPoint very often. Let's see.
So if you go up and click slideshow,
I just need to change my. Yeah, well, I've hit slideshow, but unfortunately, it's showing on my right screen. I'm trying to figure out.
So stop sharing, hit slideshow, and then when you share again, it will let you pick the slideshow.
Ta-da.
Because it's grabbing whatever computer screen it's on.
Yep. That's the challenge of multi-monitors.
Yeah, I can't find even the stop sharing at the moment there.
Hold on.
Let's see if I can just make this bigger here and go from there. Because that'll
There
work
you
too.
go.
All right.
works.
All right. All right. So back to the exciting world of insurance here. All right. So you have all your box checked, your commercial general liability for your accidental bodily injury. You have your workers' comp if your employees get injured on the job. I hope you have some type of cyber liability coverage. That's a whole different conversation. But obviously, that's the largest growth area in crime. Employment practices liability, if there's a lot of that if not has happened already, will happen. Wrongful termination, discrimination in the workplace, where the employers are sued basically because people have lost their income and now choose to blame their employers. And sometimes there's culpability, sometimes they're not. But having the cost of defense is what usually insurance does best. It pays for that lawyer to go out and represent your business versus you trying to do it yourself. You going out and hiring Amy on your own and trying to put something together. All right. But what about the item that people look over oftentimes is, what about your partner? If you don't think you have a partner, that could be the spouse of your key employee. If they have any ownership interest in your business and something happens to that person and they own part of your business, how do you deal with that? Do they have any skill set to run the business, any desire to run the business? Do they have any financial contribution to the business, or would they just be a drain where they expect a check every week to continue their own family finances? Let's see. So business survival strategies, as Emmy had mentioned, cross-purchase agreements, key person insurance. Two different concepts there. Cross-purchase agreement is when you have multiple owners of a business. So basically, big concept, you're just buying each other out. So you're not in business with your partner's spouse at that point in time. Key person insurance would pay for that key employee. It may not be an owner in the business, but you're funding an insurance policy to pay for what happens if that key person's skill set goes away. How do you maintain the business if your sales and your marketing department just went away, or or worse, your production, your manufacturing key person, you know nothing about that skill set. It takes multiple skills to run a business, and if you lose part of that, that's more than problematic. Life insurance can pay for the outright death of a partner. That's relatively easy. You can get together with Tammy, you can get together with Amy, and they ask a lot of questions to help you drill down on what is the value of your business. What is it that the spouse of your partner would expect if your partner, what's reasonable? And two partners oftentimes contribute very differently to a business. Maybe one person's the money person. They wrote a big check to get the business off the ground, but they don't contribute all that much. And there's one person who knows how to run the business. How do you value that? That's individual, and it's a discussion to be had before something happens to the partners. What is the value of each? What's the equity each has in that business? And what would you need to get out? Obviously, along those lines too, is what key debt do you have? Did you take on a big business loan to buy key equipment? Did you need to buy a building? You have big business loans to pay for the staff that you have. As Amy and Tammy had alluded to earlier, we know a person that couldn't even make payroll. They died on a Tuesday. Payroll was on Thursday. Their staff was out on jobs. Who could write checks? No one. No one was not even on the checking account. So frank discussions. We have those frank discussions at Thanksgiving and the holidays with our family members. This is a great time for the business partners to talk about what if contingency planning. I apologize. I've been going back and forth with my mother on during the meeting over here because they don't have power in Narragansett and how to get the generator started. Contingency planning. It could take many forms. Let's see. So back to the key person insurance too. How much would it cost you to replace your best employee? How many years did you groom that person? How many years did you look for that person before you found the right person? If that person went away due to death or disability, how would you how would you fund that to replace that? Those skill sets are not something you can go out into the open market and maybe replace for the same money that you're paying. You may have to pay top dollar to incent someone with a similar skill set, especially in today's world, to leave their job and then come over to work for your company. And even if they do, there's always that learning curve that takes some time before they know your business. What's the dollar figure of that? That's something you have to have in-depth conversations with a Tammy to go through all of the numbers that you have now and try to understand that so you can fund it through an insurance policy. Basic concepts, two different types of insurance that you can use to fund these policies: life insurance and disability insurance. Life insurance, again, is relatively easy. If someone dies, that's a fixed amount that you purchased that goes to the partner, that goes to the business. The business can buy it on the key partners in the business, on that key person. They can buy it on the partners themselves. There's many ways to structure that I won't bore you with. And then disability insurance. So you have a much, as Amy alluded to earlier, you have a much greater chance, whatever the actual number is, of becoming disabled. We've all broken something and had to hobble around on crutches. We've all had our backs go out and haven't been able to sit behind a keyboard. Disability on a partial basis is something we've all had to live with, but what if you get early onset dementia and you cannot run your business any longer? We see more and more of that going on, and having a disability policy that would kick in. We're all familiar with individual disability to protect your family's income, but then there can be a disability policy to pay for the business. So if that business owner that wrote the big check to get the business off the ground is used to getting a certain income and they're not dead, they're in a nursing home, what does that look like? They're still alive. They have a vested interest. They're still an owner in the business, but they're not able to contribute either financially or through their own labor any longer. And you can buy a disability policy to protect the business for that and the beneficiaries. So there's lots of ways I can bore you folks with this in detail, but I'll leave it at this. Every situation is individual. It takes lots of conversation up front, but it's well worthwhile to make sure that your friends, loved ones, employees, and your clients are not left holding the bag for lack of planning. That's all I've got. I'm sticking to it.
If you can stop your share, that would be good.
And that's Chris's building in Warwick.
Okay.
All right.
And I'm going to go back to mine for a second. And that was awesome, guys, by the way. So I mentioned insurance here. And I also mentioned that this is sort of a unique area in the sense that it's where it's a cross section of estate planning and corporate matters and bookkeeping and accounting and insurance concerns. It all comes together when we're talking about business succession. But here's the most important slide, but I don't have it on a slide. It's this. So this is what I talk to people about when they're planning for estate planning, because just like Chris said, you don't want your family or your employees to have to help you because you didn't do this plan. And at the very bottom of this sort of triangle pyramid, the foundation of any estate plan is the simplest documents that you can do, which is powers of attorney. Everybody over the age of 18, and this includes your college kids and everybody, needs a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. If you're not able to speak for yourself, you need someone to be able to speak for you. And in the business sense, and that's what I'll focus on here, you need somebody who can speak for the financial matters. If you don't have anybody on the bank accounts, if you don't have anyone on your signature card for your bank accounts, you need someone who's able to sign those checks, make sure the payroll's made that week, make sure that you're signing for any equipment that's coming in. And that's the very basics. That's the bottom part. The next part up, when I talk to people about estate planning, this center part of the pyramid, that's legacy planning. So that's a will, that's a trust. If you are owning your business where the shares or the membership interests are owned by a revocable trust or a living trust, you avoid probate. And you have a trustee who's able to just maintain that continuity, sign checks, sign contracts, whatever needs to be done outside of the court system. So that conversation about will versus revocable living trust is one that I have almost every single day. People think that once they have a will, they're able to avoid probate and we're able to avoid court action, and that is not true. So a will is better than having nothing, because if you don't have a will, someone else is deciding who your beneficiaries are. Someone else needs to be appointed to sign checks. But if you go from a will to a living trust is something that's tax neutral. It's still under your social security number while you're alive. But once you pass, you have a trustee who's able to take complete control immediately outside of the court system, as long as everything's properly funded. So a revocable trust is really important for anybody who owns a business. And that's even when we have partners and multiple owners. I advise them all to go get an estate planner to come in and make sure that your shares or your membership interests are owned by a trust. It'll maintain the continuity, which maintains the value, which means that everyone benefits when something's going to happen. And like Tammy said, the two certainties in life are taxes and death. So we need to plan for them. So we might as well go ahead and do that through business planning and through estate planning. So with that, I'm supposed to be leaving 15 minutes at the end for questions. So I will stop talking, even though I could do this all day. But if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
So we will open it up for questions. Does anybody have a question for any of our panelists?
If not, I'm just going to keep talking.
So Amy, you mentioned for anyone over 18, is that just the power of attorney, or, okay.
That's the power of attorney. The example I give is that you'll have a lot of young folks who are maybe in a car accident, maybe in a ski accident. We have all kinds of horrible scenarios that come up. The younger the kids, the less concerned I am about the financial matters, the more concerned I am about healthcare matters. Because here's what happens is that if you don't have these simple powers of attorney in place, the only option you have in order to act for them, if you needed to, is a guardianship. Now, guardianship is something that we do routinely here. And I have a story that I can tell if we have a minute or two of a family in Florida where both the mother and the father passed away during COVID. And they had two kids, early teens. So, 12, 14, that age range. The grandparents were disabled, unable to take the kids. Other siblings, aunts and uncles lived all over the country, Thailand and other countries, California and Rhode Island. So it was their aunt here in Rhode Island that had to be able to open a guardianship here in Rhode Island in order to transfer the kids, because they're not able to act on their own because they're under the age of 18. Once they turn 18 though, they're adults. They're making their own decisions. So once someone turns 18 and needs someone to make decisions for them, you need to be able to have those powers of attorney in place. Again, they're simple, they're inexpensive, because let's say that there is a 25-year-old who runs a business, or maybe has a trust fund, or has some finances of their own. Nobody's able to take control of those bank accounts if they're somehow incapacitated and unable to make decisions for themselves and don't have a power of attorney in place. It's not like the parents can automatically, even though they're over the, even though they're the parents, if they're over the age of 18, you need to go to court and get a guardianship. And when we go through that guardianship process, it's public. So whenever you're in court, that there's no privacy anymore. It's a public process. It's out there for the world to see. It takes a long time. It can be inefficient. The Rhode Island system is a little bit different than the Massachusetts system. The Massachusetts system is set up with county seats and full-time judges. In Rhode Island, we have 39 cities and towns. We have 39 probate courts, and that's where you go for guardianships. And the probate courts that we have are part-time, and the probate judges we have are part-time. So if you're going to Burrillville, Foster, Coventry, they may be meeting once a month for their probate court. And it's going to be on a Thursday afternoon for a couple of hours. And once that court calendar fills, you have to wait another month in order to get onto that court calendar. And especially during COVID, it took a few months for us to get onto the calendar. And with that case I was telling you about with the kids having to move up here when we did the guardianship, even though they were under 18, it took a long time for us to get that guardianship put together because it took us a long time to get on the court calendar. So what we like to do is try to avoid that probate process because it is public and because it can be inefficient. And the way that we do that is by using either powers of attorney so that while someone's alive, someone's able to make decisions for them, or after someone passes, we have a trust and that trust will take over. So it's living documents, death documents. So the foundation of that pyramid, those are the documents, those powers of attorney protect you while you're alive. Second row of the pyramid is what helps your family and your employees after you've passed.
We have another question that came in the chat. Does it cost anything to have these conversations or to inquire about these items?
Well, with me, we do have a consultation fee. We usually do waive that consultation fee if somebody comes in through some of our professional referral sources. What we usually do though is if we do charge a consultation fee, we'll apply that to any plan that's done in the future. So we'll just reduce it off the overall price. And usually our consultation fees are more tied in with our long-term care planning for our elder folks. But I don't know about Tammy and Chris if they're charging consultation fees.
My initial consultation with anyone is included in the forward planning of everything. So there's no charge initially. And then we work it out from there.
Okay.
Same with me.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have a question?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
So my first question is about insurance between life insurance and key person insurance. So I'm the single owner of my business. Which would make sense? I mean, when do you decide it's life insurance versus key person insurance, or do you get both?
Key person insurance is life insurance. The key part of key person refers to the one individual in an organization that's irreplaceable. Generally, the the lights wouldn't be turned on every day if that person wasn't there. So in that case, being a sole proprietor, that would be you. So it would be based on life insurance to fund any heirs that you have, any legacies that you wanted to leave behind, any bills you wanted to pay off. And then again, that's an individual conversation about what kind of debts you have, what kind of legacy you'd like to leave behind for other loved ones. Some people tell me, gee, it'd be nice if my grandkids could go to Harvard someday. If when I pass away, that's an expensive ticket item. And other people will tell me, gee, I went on the GI Bill, my kids can do the same. So that's an individual conversation, and it's based on what people really want to leave behind.
Thanks. And then Tammy, you were talking about valuation, and you said that you'd need an appraisal for that. Is there any sort of rule of thumb, like if you wanted to just guesstimate a valuation, is there an average formula?
Yeah, no, so that's something I can help with. There's, yes, an appraisal is one way to do it. Like I said, the bank will do it a slightly different way. And to do it, and it's kind of like your house. To value your house for tax is completely separate to value your house for market. So, and the business is the same kind of way too. There's different processes that'll work for it, but going through the books, we can absolutely determine a value to market, at least a business of like, say your type, like the organizing business that you do. We could certainly put that together from your finances, and historic data is really key in doing evaluation.
And then I just have one final question. So you, Amy listed out all of the different people that you should have on your team for the succession planning. Who do you start with? Like, do you start with the accountant? Do you start with the insurance? Do you start with the attorney? Who do you go to first?
Great
I think
question.
we're all going to say me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, I think the key to that is we usually refer each other, because
And
I
that's,
realize what I know about taxes. I won't say could fill a thimble, but my desire to get involved in taxes is what fits in a thimble. What I know about the law is very broad terms. I would not, be qualified to speak about that, and that's where Amy comes in. So, CPAs, bookkeepers, attorneys, insurance people, we talk all the time and cross-refer our clients. To say, hey, listen, I recommend that you go, if you don't talk to this person, then talk to someone like them that,
Exactly.
as part of this concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what usually happens is, we all kind of run in the same circles, all of the financial professionals, the insurance professionals, the attorneys. And what's good about that is that we are able to cross-refer, but we're also able to identify who's the right person. Like, we may have multiple people that we work with. I may not be right for everybody. So there may be somebody who, if a business is getting close to an IPO, or if there are layers of angel investors or venture capitalists involved, I'm
Right.
probably not the right person, the right attorney. You're going to be looking at a big firm attorney. So there's different layers and different qualifications that people have, and different personalities who you like to work with. So
And that's exactly it. Yeah.
Really.
I have CPAs that I work with that are sole practitioners, all the way up to, like, you've all seen Markham commercials. I have contacts at Markham. I can put somebody together with the sole all the way up to a Markham or anywhere in between, because there's a different fit. And sometimes personalities, again, not everybody's the right fit. And I only deal with small businesses. So if somebody is in that IPO stage or whatever, I'm going to pass them on to somebody else, because that's not who I focus on. But I do have people in my little world that I can refer for every different need, from lawyers to insurance agents to accountants and financial advisors. So there's just different people for different. Everybody's individual. That's probably the best way to do it. Everybody's unique and they all have unique needs. So we all have contacts that we can connect the people with the right person for the job.
Before we finish up, I just want to make sure that everybody's questions have been answered. Anyone else Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. So I think the bottom line is do something today if you haven't started. And we've got 3 great options here. Also, the chamber can be a great resource for you too. We have a whole book of professionals that can be helpful in this, but I do think that Amy, Tammy, and Chris can be a great start for those wanting to get started and honestly need to get started. Really appreciate Chris, Tammy, and Amy, your expertise and sharing all of these helpful insights.